The river was the only place that felt like mine anymore. I knelt on the cold, smooth stones, the icy water biting into my fingers as I scrubbed a worn linen of my skirt. The forest was a tapestry of fire around me, all red and gold and amber, but its beauty felt distant, like a painting I wasn't allowed to touch. 3 months. 3 long months since I buried my mother, and the hollow space she left behind only grew larger, echoing with every silent meal in our tiny cottage. I chose this lonely bend in the Silver Thread River to avoid the washing rocks downstream where the village women gathered. I knew their whispers by heart. Poor Elara, all alone now, so quiet that one. 22 summers and no prospects, her mother's peculiar ways passed right to her. Their words were like stones in my pocket, dragging me down. I was an outsider in my own home, a human village nestled too close to the borders of the vast and mysterious Greywood Pack territory. My fingers, raw and red, traced the silver pendant at my throat, a delicate, twisting tree with roots that cradled a single moonstone, my mother's final gift. Strength is not in the roar, Elara, but in the deep, still roots, she'd whispered, pressing it into my palm. When the world rushes, be the riverbank. Watch, listen, you will see what others miss. I clung to those words, to the weight of the silver against my skin. It was my only tether. Suddenly, the pendant grew warm, not a gentle warmth, but a sharp, sudden heat that made me gasp. I dropped the wet linen. The forest had gone silent. No birdsong, no rustle of squirrels in the canopy. The very air seemed to hold its breath. A primal chill, deeper than the river's cold, slithered down my spine. Then I heard it, a desperate gurgling cry, cut short by the greedy rush of water. My head snapped up. Downstream, where the current quickened and clawed at the rocks, a small form fought the river's grip. A child? My heart leapt into my throat. No, a pup. A shifter pup in human form, small arms flailing as the water pulled him toward the roaring rapids. Every lesson, every warning screamed in my head. Stay away from shifter business. Do not look upon their young. Their protectiveness is swift and deadly. I knew the stories of the Greywood Pack, of their fierce, remote alpha king, Kaelen. Humans did not interfere. But he was just a child, and the river was winning. Hold on! The cry tore from my lips before thought could stop it. I was running, my damp skirts tangling in brambles, my bare feet slipping on mossy stones. The boy's head dipped below the surface, his dark hair like wet ink. He came up choking, terror etched on his tiny face. I didn't think. I plunged in. The cold was a physical assault, stealing the air from my lungs. The current grabbed me, trying to spin me away. But I knew this river. I'd swum these eddies as a girl. Fighting a panic that threatened to lock my limbs, I angled my body, working with the water, not against it. The pendant burned against my collarbone, a strange beacon. "I'm coming!" I choked out, water filling my mouth. Our eyes met, his wide, golden, and full of ancient fear. He reached, his small hand stretching toward mine. Our fingers connected, and I pulled him to my chest, his small body shuddering against mine. He clung with a strength that belied his size, his little heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my own. Turning was a battle. Every kick toward shore was a prayer. My muscles screamed, and darkness edged my vision. Just as my strength failed, my foot scraped solid rock. With a final, ragged effort, I dragged us both into the shallows and collapsed on the muddy bank, gasping, the boy still clutched in my arms. For a long moment, there was only the sound of our ragged breathing and the river's relentless song. The pup's skin was a furnace hot against my chilled flesh, a shocking reminder of what he was. "Are you hurt?" I managed to rasp, gently setting him back to look at him. He had a scrape on his temple, but otherwise seemed whole. He shook his head, water flying from his dark curls. "No." he said, his voice clearer than I expected, steadier. "You saved me." "What's your name?" I asked, pushing my own sodden hair from my face. "Lion," he said, then puffed out his small chest. "Prince Lion of the Greywood pack." The world tilted. Not just any shifter. The Alpha King's son. Dread, cold and sharp, replaced the fading adrenaline. What was the royal pup doing here, alone? Before I could ask, a low, vibrating growl rolled through the clearing, a sound that resonated in my very bones. The air thickened. From between the ancient pines, an enormous wolf emerged. His fur was the color of storm clouds, and his eyes were pools of molten gold, fixed on me with an intelligence that was utterly terrifying. Power radiated from him in waves, pressing down on my spirit. The Alpha. Lion scrambled up. "Father, I'm all right. She saved me. The river was too fast, but she jumped in and got me." The wolf did not look at his son. His gaze was a physical weight upon me. Instinct, some fragment of lore from my mother's stories took over. Slowly, carefully, I lowered my eyes and bowed my head, exposing the line of my neck, a gesture of submission, of no threat. "Your Majesty," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I meant no harm." The air shimmered. There was no sound, but a pressure, a gathering of energy. When I dared to glance up, the wolf was gone. In its place stood a man. He was tall, built like the mountains themselves, with the same storm-gray hair and piercing golden eyes. A scar, pale and fierce, cut from his brow to his cheek. He wore simple dark trousers and nothing else, his skin gleaming in the dappled light. A tattoo of a howling wolf encircled by thorns marked the space over his heart. "Look at me." His voice was deep, weathered by wind and command. I forced my eyes to his, keeping my head respectfully bowed. "Your name." It was not a request. "Elara," I breathed, my voice trembling. "Elara Reed. You risked the current for a shifter pup." He took a step closer, and I fought the urge to shrink back. Why? All the careful, diplomatic answers fled. Only the raw truth remained. Because he was a child, and the river does not care what blood runs in our veins. Something flickered in those golden depths. Surprise? Curiosity? He studied my face as if reading a forgotten text. Then his gaze dropped to my throat, to the pendant that had slipped from my dress. His expression shifted, a crack in the royal mask. Recognition, and something darker, a shadow of memory. "Where did you get that?" His voice was suddenly tight. "It was my mother's," I said, confused. She passed it to me." He was silent for a long moment, the forest holding its breath with him. "The pup needs warmth," he finally said, his tone shifting back to command. "You will accompany us to Greywood Hold." Fear, sharp and immediate, lanced through me. Humans did not go to the hold. They did not return from it. "Your Majesty, my village, my home." Was that a refusal? The question was soft, dangerously soft. Lion tugged on my wet sleeve. "Please come. I want to show you my fort, and Mira makes the best berry tarts." His small face was so earnest, so untouched by the tension. The Alpha, Kaelen, looked at his son, and his expression softened just a fraction. "Shift and run ahead, Lion. Tell the guards to prepare a guest chamber, and find Mira." With a brilliant smile for me, Lion shed his wet clothes, shifted seamlessly into a small, sleek gray wolf pup, and darted into the trees, leaving me utterly alone with the Alpha King. He retrieved a rolled cloak from a pack I hadn't seen and shook it out, a heavy thing of dark wool and gray fur. Without a word, he stepped forward and draped it around my shaking shoulders. His fingers brushed my neck as he fastened the clasp, and his touch was like embers. "Come," he said, turning to lead the way. "Night falls. These woods are not safe in the dark for one who cannot see in it." I took one last look at the river, at the distant, familiar smoke of my village hearths. Then I turned my back on it and followed the king of the Greywood into the deepening shadows. My mother's pendant felt heavy against my skin, a silent promise or a warning. My life, my quiet, lonely life, was gone, and I had no idea what waited for me in the dark heart of the deep woods. The forest grew ancient and watchful. Towering pines blocked the dying sun, their trunks wider than my cottage. I struggled to keep pace with Kaelen's long, sure strides, the borrowed cloak dragging at my shoulders, smelling of pine smoke and wild, untamed earth. It was strangely comforting, that scent, even as it spoke of a world I did not understand. "Your village elder," his voice cut through the twilight silence, making me jump. "The woman with the falcon's eyes. She still leads?" "Elder Winna?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, she does." "I know much about your village, Elara Reed." He didn't look back. "We watch over all who dwell near our borders." A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold traced my spine. How many times had I felt alone in the forest, only to have been seen by unseen eyes? The thought was deeply unsettling. "And you," he continued, his tone shifting, "you live alone now, since your mother's illness." It wasn't a question. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "Yes. How do you know of my mother?" He ignored me again, a frustrating habit. No father, no siblings, no husband. He said the last word as if tasting it, finding it unfamiliar. "My father died when I was young, and no to the rest." I focused on placing my feet on the treacherous path. "We keep to ourselves, my mother and I." He made a low sound, neither agreement nor disagreement. He was quiet for several minutes, holding a thick branch aside for me to pass. The simple courtesy felt monumental. "Did you know my mother?" I pressed, the memory of his reaction to the pendant pushing me forward. "You recognized her necklace." His broad shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Your mother had knowledge, herbal remedies. She traded with our healers on occasion." He paused, choosing his words with obvious care. "She was a woman of quiet strength. It was respected." It was an answer that was no answer at all. Before I could challenge him, the trees parted, and my breath caught. Greywood Hold was not a fortress of cruel spikes and grim walls. It was a part of the forest itself. Great living trees formed arches and bulwarks, their branches woven together into walls. Structures of smooth gray stone nestled between colossal roots, and lanterns glowed with a soft greenish light from within polished river stones. It was alive, powerful, and beautiful in a way that humbled the human heart. As we passed under a living archway into a broad courtyard, activity hushed. Dozens of shifters, some in human form, some in wolf form, some caught beautifully in between, turned to watch the human girl walking beside their king. "Father! Elara!" Lycan came running, now dressed in dry, soft clothes, his hair a riot of dark curls. He skidded to a halt and threw his arms around my waist. "I told everyone you're the river lady. Mira is waiting." A woman approached, her movements fluid and graceful. She had hair the color of autumn oak leaves and kind amber eyes. "My king," she inclined her head, then turned to me with a warm smile that held a hint of assessment. "You must be Elara. I am Mira, the pack healer. Come, let's get you warm and dry." Kaelen gave a slight nod. "See to her needs." His eyes found mine, holding them for a heartbeat. "We will speak after you've rested." Then he was gone, swallowed by a group of waiting warriors, his authority settling around him like a mantle. Mira led me away, Lycan chattering excitedly at my side. The hold was a labyrinth of organic halls, the walls curved and embedded with those glowing stones. We entered a chamber that took my breath away. It was round, with a bed piled with furs and woven blankets, and a large window that looked out over the endless forest canopy, now painted indigo by twilight. A copper tub steamed before a hearth where a fire crackled. "It is too much," I stammered, overwhelmed. "I don't need—" "You saved our prince," Mira said gently, firmly. "The pack cares for its own, and for its friends." She laid out a simple, deep green dress. "Rest, bathe. Lion, let Elara have some peace." Lion pouted but nodded. "I'll see you at the evening meal. You're sitting with us." He dashed out. Alone, I sank onto the bed, the weight of the day crashing down. I, Elara Reed, the village oddity, was bathing in the Alpha King's stronghold, about to dine at his table. My fingers found the pendant. "What secrets did you keep, Mother?" I bathed in the fragrant, herbal-scented water, feeling the cold and the fear slowly leach away. Later, dressed in the soft green gown, my hair brushed and braided by Mira's capable hands, I stood at the window. "The king does not often bring guests to the inner hold," Mira remarked softly, securing a final pin. "I saved Lion. He feels responsible," I said, though her words stirred something in me. "Responsibility is one thing, personal escort is another. You intrigue him, Elara. That is a rare thing these days." The great hall took my breath away. It was a vast circular space, the ceiling a dome of intertwined living branches. A huge central fire pit glowed, and pack members filled long tables, talking and laughing. The high cable sat on a natural dais of stone, and there he was. King Kaelen had changed into a dark gray tunic, the fabric emphasizing his powerful frame. His hair was tied back, making the stark line of his scar more pronounced. He stood as I approached, and the hall quieted. "Elara," he said, and his voice, though still commanding, held a different timbre. "Join us." I sat beside Lion, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes. Kaelen raised a carved wooden cup. "To our guest, to courage that leaps into cold rivers without hesitation." A rumble of approval echoed through the hall, and the tension broke. Food was brought: roasted vegetables, tender meat, dark bread, honeyed fruits. Lion piled my plate, talking non-stop. Kaelen watched me, his gaze thoughtful. "You are quiet." "It is a lot to take in," I admitted. "Tell me of your mother's healing work," he said, and it felt like more than polite conversation. I spoke of her herb garden, her patience, her way of listening not just to words, but to silences. As I talked of her, the pendant warm at my throat, I saw Mira and Kaelen exchange another of those glances. "She was a remarkable woman," Kaelen said, his voice low. "Her knowledge ran deeper than the village knew." A commotion erupted at the hall entrance. A shifter, bleeding from a gash on his arm, stumbled in. "My king, hunters, at the southern border, they carried silver, and they spoke of cleansing the woods. They wounded Jarek before we drove them back." The word silver sent a visible shudder through the pack. Silver was poison, a weapon of hatred. Kaelen was on his feet, his presence expanding to fill the space. "How many?" "5, but they were not from the deep woods. Their scent was of the human villages." All eyes turned to me. The weight of them was suffocating. "Elara's village has a treaty," Mira said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Treaties break," growled a grisly shifter with a salt and pepper beard. Kaelen's beta, I would learn, named Torvin. He looked directly at me, suspicion hardening his features. "She appears the day the prince is vulnerable. Now hunters breach our lands. It is convenient." "I saved Lion's life," I said, my voice trembling with sudden anger. "Does that mean nothing?" "It means everything," Kaelen's voice cut through, sharp as a blade, "which is why her motives bear scrutiny." He turned his golden eyes on me, and in them I saw not just a king, but a protector weighing a terrible risk. Would you stand with us, Elara Reed? Would you help us discover why your people break peace? The question hung in the smoky air. I thought of my lonely cottage, of the villagers' whispers. I thought of hunters wielding silver, seeking to cleanse. They may not be my people in this, I said, my voice finding strength. If they bring harm without cause, I will help you. But I ask for mercy if it can be given, for understanding before vengeance. A long, tense silence followed. Then Kaelen gave a single, slow nod. Then you will come to the border at dawn, and we will see the truth together. As the pack burst into frantic planning, Kaelen leaned close, his words for me alone. You continue to surprise me, Elara Reed. I met his gaze, the fear still there, but underneath it a spark of something new, determination. I am full of surprises, Your Majesty. Dawn came cold and gray, mist clinging to the forest floor like ghostly fingers. Our party was small. Kaelen, Torvin, 2 other warriors, and me, wrapped once more in the heavy fur cloak. We moved like shadows, the shifters silent, my own human clumsiness amplified in the eerie quiet. Kaelen walked beside me, his attention constantly scanning the woods. The border stream is just ahead, he murmured. We will observe first. What if they're just lost hunters? I whispered back, a last thread of hope in my heart. With silver-tipped arrows, Torvin snorted from ahead, not bothering to lower his voice. They are poachers or worse. Your kind always covets what is not theirs. Before I could retort, Kaelen raised a hand. We froze. Ahead, through the trees, I saw the glint of water and heard voices, human voices. We crept forward, hiding behind a thicket of hawthorn. 5 men stood by the stream. My heart sank. I knew 3 of them, Burke, the miller's son, Colm, a trapper, and old Heron. They were not bad men, but now they held bows, and their quivers held arrows that gleamed with a sickly pale light. Silver. And their eyes were wrong, glazed yet fervent, like men in the grip of a fever dream. We must purify the crossing, Heron was saying, his voice monotone. The taint must not spread. What taint? Colm asked, but his voice lacked real curiosity. It was as if he was reciting lines. The beast taint, Heron replied, touching a crude clay medallion at his throat. All of them wore one. The Master has shown us. We must cut it out. The Master. The word dripped with cold dread. They're not themselves, I breathed to Kaelen. Look at their eyes. Look at those amulets. Kaelen's jaw was tight, his golden eyes narrowed. Blood magic, he growled, the words laced with venom. A compulsion charm. This is not mere poaching. We have to help them, I said urgently. They are armed and enchanted, Torvin snapped. Helping them might mean killing them. Elara, Kaelen said, his voice low and intent. You know them. Could you reach them? Break through the compulsion? Fear clawed at my throat. But I saw Heron, who had fixed my mother's door when the hinge broke. I saw Burke, who always had a kind word. I can try. Kaelen held my gaze, searching. We will be here. If they raise a weapon... I nodded, took a deep breath to steady my pounding heart, and stepped out from the thicket. Heron, Burke, I called, keeping my hands visible. They spun, bows coming up. The blank, feverish eyes focused on me. There was no recognition. Elara Reed, Heron's voice was confused, as if trying to place a distant memory. You should not be here. The taint is strong here. There is no taint, Heron, I said, taking a careful step forward. This is Greywood land. You're breaking the treaty. Remember the treaty? Peace for generations. Peace is a lie the beasts tell. Colm spat, his fingers tightening on his bowstring. The Master revealed it. They twist the woods. They steal the game. What Master? I asked, my eyes fixed on the amulet at his neck. Who told you this? Elder Winna would never sanction this. At the mention of Elder Winna, Heron flinched, a flicker of confusion. Elder Winna. She is unwell. The master guides us now. Take off the amulet, Heron, I pleaded, taking another careful step. Just take it off and think for yourself. Remember my mother, Marin Reed. She traded with these people. She respected them. My mother's name caused another crack. Heron's hand rose to the clay disc. His fingers trembled. Do not touch the talisman, Burke shouted, his voice rising in panic. The master protects us. She is trying to weaken you. I'm trying to free you, I cried out, desperation breaking through. It was the wrong move. The emotion, the raising of my voice, snapped whatever fragile thread held them. Burke's eyes hardened. He drew his bowstring back, the silver tip aimed at my heart. Time seemed to slow. Then a gray blur shot past me. Kaelen moved with impossible speed, a force of nature. He didn't shift fully, but his form seemed to ripple with contained power. He knocked Burke's bow aside, the silver arrow shattering against a tree, and in the same motion he disarmed Colm with a twist of his wrist. Torvin and the others surged from the trees, not to attack, but to contain. They moved like the wind, disarming the other men, pinning them without causing harm. Kaelen stood before Heron, who stared in terror at the Alpha King now revealed. Kaelen reached out, not with violence, but with a swift, decisive motion, and snatched the amulet from Heron's neck. He crushed it in his fist. Heron gasped, staggering back as if struck. The glaze vanished from his eyes, replaced by dawning horror and confusion. What? King Kaelen? Elara? By the stars, what are we doing here? One by one, Torvin removed the other amulets. The change was instant and profound. The men blinked, looked at their weapons, at the shifters holding them, and shame washed over their faces. Kaelen held up the fragments of clay. Who gave you these? Heron, his voice shaking, looked at the ground. A stranger, came to the village a month ago, called himself Silas. He tended to Elder Winna when she fell ill. He spoke of hidden dangers, of corruption from the woods. He gave us these for protection when we hunted. He looked up, tears in his eyes. We would never... The silver. I don't even remember getting it. Silas. Kaelen repeated the name like a curse. He looked at me, his expression grave. His name was Thorn, a blood mage I banished from these woods years ago for practicing forbidden arts. He swore vengeance. And now he's in my village, I whispered, the pieces crashing together, using my people as weapons against you? And worse, Torvin said, sniffing the air near the broken amulets, the magic is old and strong. He is not just compelling them, he is stoking their fear, twisting their memories, making his poison taste like truth. Kaelen turned to the remorseful hunters. You will return to your village. You will say you saw nothing. You will act normally. Tell no one of this meeting, not even each other, lest Thorn sense it. And Elder Winna? I asked, my heart aching. We do not know, Kaelen said, but if Thorn is there, her illness may not be natural. He looked at me, a decision hardening in his eyes. You cannot return. What? I must. My home, my people, are a nest of vipers controlled by a man who wants my pack destroyed. He interrupted, his voice final. You are now the human who saved my son and helped thwart his hunters. You would be his primary target. The truth of his words was a cold stone in my gut. I had no home to return to. Come, Kaelen said, his tone leaving no room for argument. We return to the hold. We must understand what Thorn truly wants and why he has chosen now to strike. As we turned from the border, the freed hunters looking lost and afraid, I felt a chapter of my life slam shut. The cottage, the garden, the quiet river bends, they were lost to me. I walked back into the deep woods, not as a reluctant guest, but as a refugee. And the Alpha King walking beside me was no longer just a terrifying sovereign, but the only shield between me and a darkness that had already swallowed my home.
The atmosphere in Greywood Hold had shifted from curious hospitality to a tense, quiet readiness. News of Thorn's return spread like a cold wind through the stones and roots of the place. I was given a new chamber, smaller but connected to the inner family quarters, a clear sign of Kaelen's stated protection. I was under his paw for better or worse. Days fell into a strange rhythm. Mornings were spent with Lycan, who had appointed himself my cheerful shadow. He showed me the kitchens, the gardens where medicinal herbs grew, the training grounds where young shifters practiced control. His innocence was a balm. Afternoons, I sought out Mira in her healing den, a sunlit room filled with drying plants and the scent of chamomile. "Tell me of Thorn," I asked her one day, grinding rowan berries into a paste as she directed. Mira's usually warm face clouded. "He was the pack historian once. Kaelen's father trusted him deeply, but his studies turned dark. He became obsessed with purity of bloodline, with ancient, cruel magics that bound wills and twisted nature. He believed humans were a blight to be scrubbed from the world, and that shifters who interacted with them were weakened." "And Kaelen banished him?" "After Thorn's experiments led to the death of a young pack member," Mira said softly. "Kaelen challenged him. The fight was brutal. Kaelen won, but he carried the scar from that day. He showed mercy. He exiled Thorn instead of taking his life, a mercy Thorn saw as weakness." She paused, measuring dried mistletoe. "He also blames Kaelen for the death of his mate, Lyra. Not directly, but in the chaos Thorn sowed, she was caught in a trap meant for Kaelen. The grief changed him, made him harder, more distant, until you and Lycan came out of the river." Her words settled heavily in the quiet room. I thought of the sorrow in Kaelen's eyes when they weren't burning with command. A shared language of loss passed between us, unspoken. My real education began in the evenings. After the shared meal, where I now sat with a quiet acceptance from the pack, Kaelen would summon me to his study. It was a room of wood and stone lined with scrolls and carvings. Here, he was not the fierce alpha, but a weary strategist. He spread a map of the territory on a broad table. "Thorn is not just attacking, he's isolating us, turning the human villages into a weapon, cutting off our trade routes, our alliances." His finger traced the Silver Thread River. "Your village is the key. It controls the main ford. If he fully controls it, he can choke us." "What does he want?" I asked, staring at the map as if it could confess. "Revenge. For his exile, for his pride, and perhaps," Kaelen's gaze drifted to my pendant, "he was fascinated by your mother." A chill ran through me. "Why?" Maren Reed was the only human who ever saw through his glamours, his lies. Her mind was resilient to his kind of magic. It infuriated him. She was a living rebuttal to his philosophy of human weakness. He met my eyes. "Your resistance to the river's pull, the way you reached Lycan, it may not have been just courage, Elara. It may be her gift passed to you." The pendant felt suddenly warmer. "Do you think he knows about me?" "If he is in your village, digging into its history, he knows of Maren's daughter, and if he learns you are here under my protection," he didn't need to finish. "I was a prize, proof he could corrupt the daughter of the woman who defied him." "Then we use that," I said, the idea forming before I could fear it. Kaelen's head snapped up. "Explain." "Let him learn I'm here. Let his hatred for me and his obsession with my mother draw him out. He'll make a mistake. He'll come for me." "Absolutely not." The words were a growl. "I will not use you as bait." "You wouldn't be using me. I'd be fighting," I insisted, a fire lighting in my chest. "This is my fight too, for my mother, for my village. I'm not a warrior, but I have this resilience. Let me help." He stared at me, a storm warring in his golden eyes. Protectiveness battled with strategy, honor with necessity. "It is too dangerous." My whole life is dangerous now. The words burst out, fueled by weeks of fear and powerlessness. I can't just sit in a stone room and wait for the storm to pass. My mother didn't raise me to hide. She raised me to be the riverbank, to stand firm. Silence stretched between us, thick and charged. He took a step closer, the map forgotten. "You have her fire," he said, his voice a low rumble, "and her stubbornness. Is that a yes?" I held my breath. Before he could answer, a frantic knock shook the study door. Torvin entered without waiting, his face ashen. "A messenger from the village, a boy hiding in the woods. He says Elder Winna is dead. The stranger, Silas, Thorn, has declared himself steward. He summoned a town meeting tomorrow night. He's going to announce a cleansing march into Greywood." The news was a physical blow. Winna gone, the last thread of sane leadership severed. Kaelen's face became a mask of grim resolve. All debate was over. "Then we do not wait for him to come to us." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the terrifying, exhilarating decision being made. "You will have your part to play, Elara Reed, but not as bait, as a guide. We go to the village, tomorrow. We end this." That night, sleep was impossible. I stood at my window, watching the moon paint the forest silver. The plan was madness. A small group, led by Kaelen himself, would infiltrate the village during the meeting. My role was to get them to the meeting hall unseen, using the hidden paths and blind spots I knew from a lifetime of being an outsider looking in. Fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, singing in my blood, was a sense of terrifying rightness. This was why the pendant had warmed. This was why the river brought me to Lycan. I was not just a survivor. I was a stone in the stream, about to change the current's course. The door to my chamber opened softly. I turned, expecting Mira. It was Kaelen. He stood in the doorway, a formidable silhouette. "You should rest." "I can't." He stepped inside, closing the door gently. He moved to stand beside me at the window, a quiet, powerful presence. "You are afraid." "Terrified." "Good," he said, surprising me. "Only fools feel no fear before a battle. Courage is feeling that fear and choosing to act anyway." He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become." Tears, unexpectedly and hot, pricked my eyes. "I hope so." "I know so." His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "When this is over, there will be a place for you here, Elara, if you wish it. The pack does not forget its debts or its friends." He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The promise in his words, the respect in his eyes, was a warmth that spread through me, melting some of the icy fear. He saw me not as a helpless human, but as an ally, perhaps even more. He left as silently as he came. I touched my mother's pendant, its silver cool now. The path ahead was dark and dangerous, but for the first time since I'd pulled Lycan from the water, I did not feel alone. I had a pack at my back, and I had a king who believed in me. Tomorrow, we would take back my home.
Dusk was our cloak. We moved as a tight unit through the familiar woods that now felt alien and threatening. Kaelen, Torvin, Mira, and two of their most trusted warriors, all in human form, their movements unnaturally silent. I led, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, every rustle of leaves sounding like a shout. We reached the edge of the village, hiding in the copse of birch trees where I used to collect mushrooms. The sight that greeted me stole my breath. My peaceful village was gone. In its place was an armed camp. Men I'd known all my life stood at corners with staves and knives, their expressions blank and vigilant. The clay amulets glinted at every throat. No children played. No smoke rose from hearths for the evening meal. A heavy, fearful silence lay over the houses. The meeting hall, a large timber-framed building, glowed with an oppressive yellow light.
The entire adult population seemed to be filing inside, moved by an invisible, grim force. "The compulsion is widespread," Mira whispered, her healer's senses tingling. "The air reeks of coerced will." "Our way," I murmured, pointing to a narrow gap between the tanner's shed and the back of the bakery, a path I'd used 100 times to avoid prying eyes. "It leads to the storeroom at the back of the hall. There's a loose floorboard. We can hear everything." Kaelen nodded. "Go." We slipped from shadow to shadow, my knowledge of every fence, every overgrown garden proving invaluable. We reached the back of the hall unseen. As I'd promised, a weathered board in the storeroom floor came up quietly, revealing a cramped space beneath the main platform. One by one, we dropped down into the dusty darkness. The voices from above were muffled but clear. I heard the familiar cadence of my neighbors, but the words were wrong. They spoke in unison, like a dreadful choir, pledging to cleanse the corruption, to reclaim our purity. Then a new voice slithered through the floorboards, smooth, cultured, and cold as a grave. "Thorn." "My faithful friends," the voice oozed, "you have seen the sickness. The game flees, the river runs foul, the very air weakens your children. This is the work of the beasts in the wood. Their unnatural presence is a poison in our soil." A rumble of agreement, too eager, too uniform, shook the floor above us. "For too long we have lived under their shadow, honoring a treaty that they now break. They steal our livestock, they threaten our borders, and they have even now taken one of your own, Elara Reed, seduced by their magic, a traitor to her kind." My blood ran cold. He was painting a target on my back for the whole village. "But tonight," Thorn's voice rose, triumphant, "tonight we become the cure. With the talismans I have given you, you are protected from their mind-twisting magics. At dawn we march. We will burn their dens. We will drive them back to the barren mountains where they belong, and we will reclaim our lost sister from their clutches." The roar that followed was deafening, a wave of manipulated fury. I felt Kaelen tense beside me, a low growl vibrating in his chest that only I could hear. "We must act now," Torvin hissed, "before this madness spills into our woods." "No." Kaelen's whisper was a blade. "We cut off the head. Elara, can we reach the main hall from here?" I nodded, pointing to a small, dusty door in the foundation wall. "It leads to the alcove behind the speaker's platform." "Good. Torvin, Mira, create a diversion at the front doors when you hear my signal. Draw their attention. Elara, you stay. I'm coming with you," my voice firm in the darkness. "He's using my name, my mother's memory. I need to face him." I felt his gaze on me, saw the gleam of his golden eyes. After a heartbeat, he gave a single curt nod. We waited, the sounds of frenzied preparation echoing above. Then Kaelen touched my arm, a silent signal. We slipped from shadow to shadow, my knowledge of every fence, every overgrown garden proving invaluable. We reached the back of the hall unseen. As I'd promised, a weathered board in the storeroom floor came up quietly, revealing a cramped space beneath the main platform. One by one, we dropped down into the dusty darkness. The voices from above were muffled but clear. I heard the familiar cadence of my neighbors, but the words were wrong. They spoke in unison, like a dreadful choir, pledging to cleanse the corruption, to reclaim our purity. Then a new voice slithered through the floorboards, smooth, cultured, and cold as a grave. "Thorn." "My faithful friends," the voice oozed, "you have seen the sickness. The game flees, the river runs foul, the very air weakens your children. This is the work of the beasts in the wood. Their unnatural presence is a poison in our soil. A rumble of agreement, too eager, too uniform, shook the floor above us. For too long we have lived under their shadow, honoring the treaty that they now break. They steal our livestock, they threaten our borders, and they have even now taken one of your own, Elara Reed, seduced by their magic, a traitor to her kind. My blood ran cold. He was painting a target on my back for the whole village. But tonight, Thorn's voice rose triumphant. Tonight, we become the cure. With the talismans I have given you, you are protected from their mind-twisting magics. At dawn, we march. We will burn their dens. We will drive them back to the barren mountains where they belong, and we will reclaim our lost sister from their clutches. The roar that followed was deafening, a wave of manipulated fury. I felt Kaelen tense beside me, a low growl vibrating in his chest that only I could hear. We must act now, Torvin hissed, before this madness spills into our woods. No, Kaelen's whisper was a blade. We cut off the head. Elara, can we reach the main hall from here? I nodded, pointing to a small, dusty door in the foundation wall. It leads to the alcove behind the speaker's platform. Good. Torvin, Mira, create a diversion at the front doors when you hear my signal. Draw their attention. Elara, you stay. I'm coming with you, my voice firm in the darkness. He's using my name, my mother's memory. I need to face him. I felt his gaze on me, saw the gleam of his golden eyes. After a heartbeat, he gave a single curt nod. We waited, the sounds of frenzied preparation echoing above. Then Kaelen touched my arm, a silent signal. We slipped from shadow to shadow, my knowledge of every fence, every overgrown garden proving invaluable. We reached the back of the hall unseen. As I'd promised, a weathered board in the storeroom floor came up quietly, revealing a cramped space beneath the main platform. One by one, we dropped down into the dusty darkness. The voices from above were muffled but clear. I heard the familiar cadence of my neighbors, but the words were wrong. They spoke in unison, like a dreadful choir, pledging to cleanse the corruption, to reclaim our purity. Then a new voice slithered through the floorboards, smooth, cultured, and cold as a grave. Thorn. My faithful friends, the voice oozed, you have seen the sickness. The game flees, the river runs foul, the very air weakens your children. This is the work of the beasts in the wood. Their unnatural presence is a poison in our soil. A rumble of agreement, too eager, too uniform, shook the floor above us. For too long we have lived under their shadow, honoring a treaty that they now break. They steal our livestock, they threaten our borders, and they have even now taken one of your own, Elara Reed, seduced by their magic, a traitor to her kind. My blood ran cold. He was painting a target on my back for the whole village. But tonight, Thorn's voice rose triumphant. Tonight, we become the cure. With the talismans I have given you, you are protected from their mind-twisting magics. At dawn, we march. We will burn their dens. We will drive them back to the barren mountains where they belong, and we will reclaim our lost sister from their clutches. The roar that followed was deafening, a wave of manipulated fury. I felt Kaelen tense beside me, a low growl vibrating in his chest that only I could hear. We must act now, Torvin hissed, before this madness spills into our woods. No, Kaelen's whisper was a blade. We cut off the head. Elara, can we reach the main hall from here? I nodded, pointing to.
The aftermath was a quiet, shuddering thing. Thorn,
bound with cold iron and rowan rope, was taken away by Torvin and the warriors, his venomous glare fixed on me until the last. The villagers milled in the hall, some weeping, some embracing, all wearing expressions of profound shame and confusion. Kaelen had shifted back, accepting a tunic from Mira. He stood beside me on the platform, a solid, steadying presence, but he let me speak to my people. "There is no shame in being deceived," I told them, my voice tired but clear. "The shame is his alone. Now we heal. We remember who we are." Gareth was the first to approach, his head bowed. "Elara, King Kaelen, we have no words." "Then use no words," Kaelen said, his voice carrying without needing to be loud. "Rebuild your homes, bury your elder with honor. The treaty stands, stronger for having been tested." It was a king's pardon, and the relief in the room was palpable. The practical work began. Mira moved among the people, offering remedies for the headaches and fatigue that followed the broken compulsion. I helped direct others to prepare Elder Winna's body for burial, a sad but necessary duty. As dawn tinged the sky, Kaelen found me sitting on the steps of the meeting hall, watching the village slowly come back to life. "You should rest," he said, sitting beside me, not as a king, but as a man. "Soon," I said, wrapping my arms around my knees. "It doesn't feel real. It's over. Thorn is defeated. His influence is broken, but the healing will take time." He was quiet for a moment. "You were magnificent, Elara." The simple praise warmed me more than any cloak. I was terrified. "I know." He glanced at me, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips. It was not obvious. We sat in companionable silence, watching the sunrise paint the cottages in gold. The connection between us hummed, unspoken but undeniable. He had trusted me with his son, with his strategy, with a part of his past. I had trusted him with my life, with my people's fate. "What will happen to Thorn?" I asked finally. "He will be taken far from here, to a place from which he cannot return. His magic will be bound. He will live with the consequences of his choices." There was no cruelty in his tone, only finality. "Mercy once nearly destroyed us. This is justice. It was fair. It was right. And what happens now? To me?" The question hung in the morning air. Kaelen turned fully to face me, the dawn light caught in his golden eyes, making them look like liquid fire. "That is your choice, Elara. Your cottage stands. Your village needs wise voices to lead it out of this shadow. You could stay. You would be revered here." He was giving me my home back, the loneliness, the whispers, all of it, but it would be different now. I would be different. "Or," I prompted softly. "Or," he said, his voice dropping, becoming intensely personal, "you could return to Greywood Hold, not as a guest or a debt to be repaid, but as a member of the pack. Your mother's legacy is there, in the healing halls, in the old stories. Your courage has earned you a place. Lycan would be overjoyed. Mira would value your help." He paused, his gaze searching mine. "I would value your counsel, your perspective, your presence." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was more than an offer of shelter. It was an offer of belonging, of a family, strange and wild and wonderful, a place where my mother's secrets were not a burden but a heritage, where my own strange resilience was not an oddity but a strength. I looked at my village, at the home of my past. Then I looked at Kaelen, at the promise of a future I had never dared imagine. "The river didn't just bring me to Lycan," I said slowly, my fingers finding my pendant. "It brought me home, to a home I didn't know I was missing." His eyes softened, the stern alpha completely gone. In his place was just Kaelen, a man who had carried too much weight for too long, seeing a new path forward. "Is that a yes?" I smiled, a true, free smile that felt like the sunrise itself. "That is a yes." The journey back to Greywood Hold was not a retreat, but a homecoming.
Word had already flown ahead of us. As we passed under the living arch, the pack was assembled. There were no cheers, but a deep, resonant silence of respect. Warriors dipped their heads, mothers smiled, children peeked from behind legs with curious eyes. And then Lion burst from the crowd, shifting mid-leap into a bounding pup into a boy who crashed into me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You came back! You came back forever!" I hugged him tightly, tears in my eyes. I came back forever. Over his head, my eyes met Kaelen's. He stood watching us, his usual sternness replaced by an expression of profound peace. In that shared look, 1,000 words were spoken. A partnership was acknowledged. A new chapter, for both of us, for the pack, had begun. I was no longer Elara Reed, the lonely human from the village. I was Elara of the Greywood, the river's gift, the pack's heart. And though no words of claim were spoken that day, everyone in that courtyard, including me, felt the truth of it settle into the stones and roots of the hold. I was home.
Life in Greywood Hold settled into a new, vibrant rhythm. My days were no longer my own lonely orbit, but part of a constellation. Mornings were for Lion, who insisted on lessons that involved identifying every plant in the Hold's gardens and telling me the pack's history through a child's delighted eyes. He was a bridge between my old world and my new one, his joy infectious. Afternoons belonged to Mira in the healing den. Under her patient tutelage, my mother's herbal knowledge, once used for village aches and fevers, deepened. I learned to prepare poultices for silver burns, to distill tinctures that could ease the violent aches of a first shift for the young ones, to recognize the subtle signs of a magical malaise. My hands, which had scrubbed laundry in a cold river, now ground healing powders and stitched wounds. The work was hard, but it filled the hollow space grief had left with purpose. And the evenings were often spent in Kaelen's study. Our talks moved from strategy and threats to the quiet governance of a territory. He asked my thoughts on trade with the recovering Willowford, on managing the deer herds so both pack and village could thrive, on how to foster the fragile new trust. He listened, truly listened, his sharp mind weighing my human perspective. It was a heady, terrifying responsibility. He wasn't just being kind, he valued what I brought. One such evening, a week after my official acceptance into the pack, a question that had simmered in me finally surfaced. We were reviewing a map showing new patrol routes. "Kaelen," I began hesitantly, "you never told me. How did my mother come to be your healer?" He leaned back in his chair, the firelight dancing over the planes of his face. It was a story from a different time. My father was wounded in an ambush by rogues, a poisoned blade. Our healers were failing. In desperation, a scout brought a human woman from Willowford, Marin. She was young then, but her eyes held an old wisdom. She didn't flinch from the blood, from the snarling warriors. She asked for specific mushrooms from the high caves, for willow bark from a tree that grew in a certain bend of the river. A faint smile touched his lips. She saved his life. My father, in gratitude, offered her a place here. He saw her value. For 7 years she served, learning our ways, teaching us hers. She was revered. "Why did she leave?" I whispered. His gaze found mine. "She met your father, a human trader with a kind smile and stories of distant places. She loved him. The pull of her own world, of a simpler life, was strong. My father gave her the pendant as a token of our eternal bond and protection. He made her promise that if she or her line ever needed the pack, we would answer." His eyes held a deep, unreadable emotion. "We are answering that promise now, Elara, in more ways than one." The air between us grew thick with unspoken history and a new, potent understanding. The connection I felt to him wasn't just about Lion or shared danger. It was woven through my mother's legacy, with a debt of honor and care that spanned generations. Before either of us could speak further, Torvin entered, his expression troubled. "A rider from the northern ridge pack, my king. He brings troubling news." The moment shattered, replaced by the immediate concerns of an alpha. I rose to leave, but Kaelen motioned for me to stay. "You should hear this." The rider was a rugged shifter with the scent of snow still on him. "King Kaelen," he bowed, "my alpha sends word. There are whispers in the deep valleys, whispers that Thorn had allies, not here, but farther north, those who share his twisted ideals. They call themselves the Purifiers. With Thorn gone, they may see an opportunity or seek retaliation." A new cold seeped into the room. Thorn was a singular poison, but an ideology was a weed that could spread. "Thank your alpha for the warning," Kaelen said, his voice regaining its steely command. "We will be vigilant." After the rider was led away to rest, Torvin paced before the fire. "This is not over. It may never be over. The fight against such hatred is a long one." I stood, facing him. "Then we fight it the way my mother would, not just with claws and strength, but with healing, with showing a different way. Willowford is proof. Fear turned to trust. That is our strongest weapon." He stopped pacing, looking at me as if seeing me anew. "You speak with the wisdom of both your worlds, Elara." He came to stand before me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "When you speak, I see the future of these woods, not divided but intertwined, a future worth fighting for." His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was electric, a spark that traveled straight to my core. It was not a claim, not a kiss, but a recognition so profound it stole my breath. "I must increase the patrols, send envoys to our allied packs," he said, his voice rough, his hand dropping reluctantly. "What can I do?" I asked, my own voice unsteady. "Keep doing what you are doing," he said, his golden eyes burning with a fierce light. "Heal, teach Lion, be the heart of this hold. That is how you fight. That is how we all fight." That night, as I lay in my chamber, I didn't feel fear at the new threat. I felt a resolute calm. I had a role. I had a place. I was the bridge. The human healer in the shifter stronghold. The daughter of Marin Reed, fulfilling a promise older than myself. The Purifiers spoke of purity, of separation, but I had learned in the heart of Greywood that true strength was in connection, in the pack that had taken in a human girl, in the alpha who valued her mind, in the prince who loved her like family. Let them whisper in their dark valleys. We were building something bright and strong in the light of the forest, and I would defend it with every herb in my satchel, every word of truth on my tongue, and every beat of my now fiercely loyal heart. The whisper of the Purifiers became a constant low hum in the background of our lives, a storm cloud on a distant horizon. Patrols doubled. Messengers came and went from allied packs. Kaelen spent long hours in council with Torvin and his generals, his brow permanently furrowed. The peace we had won felt fragile, precious. My work became a different kind of frontline. As the only human fully integrated into the Greywood, I became the living proof against the Purifiers' ideology. Shifters who had never interacted with humans beyond wary trade now came to me with curious questions. A young warrior, Kael, asked about human fishing techniques. A mother, Anya, wondered if the salve for teething pups would work for her human cousin's baby in Willowford. I answered them all, sharing knowledge, brewing teas for those anxious about the rising tensions. I was a quiet, steady counter-melody to the drumbeat of worry. Lion felt the strain too. He became my shadow even more, his usual boundless energy tinged with a need for reassurance. We spent hours in the quiet glade behind the hold, where I'd identified a patch of my mother's favorite calming herbs. "Elara," he asked one afternoon, helping me bundle lavender, "the bad men, are they coming here?" I sat back on my heels, choosing my words with care.
There are always people who are afraid of what they don't understand, Lycan. Your father, the pack, they are making sure we are safe, and we are strong together, aren't we? He nodded, his small face serious. The strongest. You, me, father, Mira, Torvin, even grumpy old Boren from the smithy. He grinned, and the shadow passed. Will you teach me the human names for the stars tonight? Of course, I promised, my heart swelling. That evening, under a blanket of brilliant stars, I kept my promise. We lay on a flat rock, Lycan nestled against my side, as I traced constellations with my finger, telling him the stories my father had told me. Kaelen found us there, having finished his counsels. He didn't speak, just settled on the rock beside us, listening as I spun tales of heroes and hunters in the sky. When Lycan finally drifted to sleep, lulled by my voice and the rhythm of Kaelen's steady breathing, the Alpha spoke softly. You give him peace, he said. You give this whole pack peace, Elara, in ways I cannot. You give them strength and safety, I replied, looking at the starlight on his profile. I just remind them of the sweetness in life. We need both. He turned his head, his eyes capturing the starlight and holding it. I need both, he admitted, the confession raw and quiet. The weight of the crown is heavy, the fear of failing them, it is a constant companion, but when I see you with him, when I hear your laughter in the halls, the weight lessens. You are the sweetness, Elara. The intimacy of the moment under the vast, ancient sky was overwhelming. We were just a man and a woman bound by a sleeping child and a shared duty deeper than any law. You are not alone in carrying it, not anymore. His hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with mine. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a vow, a partnership of strength and sweetness, of claw and herb, of alpha and partner. The moment was shattered by the sudden, piercing howl of a sentry from the eastern wall, a warning howl. Kaelen was on his feet in an instant, the gentleman gone, replaced by the warrior king. He scooped up the sleeping Lycan and thrust him gently into my arms. To the inner sanctum, now, with Mira. What is it? I asked, fear a cold spike in my chest. Intruders, at the eastern tree line. His eyes glowed in the dark. Go. I ran, Lycan a warm, heavy weight in my arms, his sleepy protests hushed by my racing heart. The hold, so peaceful moments before, erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors streamed toward the walls in silent, lethal lines. Mothers gathered children. Mira met me at the door to the fortified healing chambers, her face set in a healer's calm. Inside, bar the door behind anyone who comes, she instructed as she took a bag of supplies. I must be at the wall. Mira, no. I am a healer of the Greywood, child, she said with a fierce smile. My place is where blood may be spilled. Yours is here, protecting the future. She nodded at Lycan, then was gone. I gathered the pack's young and elderly into the stone-lined room, my own fear held tightly in check. Lycan was awake now, clinging to my side, his eyes wide. Is it the bad men? Your father and the pack will protect us, I believed with every fiber of my being. We listened to the sounds from outside, shouts, the clash of steel, a snarl that was unmistakably Kaelen's. An eternity seemed to pass. Then the sounds died down, replaced by an ominous quiet. My knuckles were white where I gripped the edge of a table. Finally, heavy footsteps approached, a coded knock. I opened the door a crack. It was Torvin, blood smeared on his temple, but his eyes were clear. It's over, he said, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. A scouting party of purifiers, 12 of them. They thought to test our defenses. They were decisively met. Kaelen? The name was out of my mouth before I could stop it. Unharmed, the Alpha is seeing to the prisoners and the wounded. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw respect in his eyes without a trace of suspicion. He fought like a demon, Elara, to protect the hold, to protect you. Relief washed through me, so strong my knees felt weak. The attack had been a probe, a test, and we had passed.
But it was a grim reminder. The storm cloud was closer now. The peace would have to be fought for, day by day. Later, when the wounded were tended and the prisoners secured in the cells, Kaelen came to the healing chamber. He was still in his fighting leathers, splashed with mud and worse, his face a mask of grim satisfaction and lingering rage. His eyes found me across the room where I was applying a salve to a young warrior's shallow cut. Without a word, he strode over. He didn't embrace me. He simply stood before me, his presence a solid wall against the night's terror. "They will not breach these walls," he said, a low vow. "I will not allow it." I looked up at him, at the alpha who had just defended his home, and saw the man who had held my hand under the stars. "I know," I said simply. In that shared look, in the aftermath of violence, our unspoken bond forged in calm was now tempered in fire. We were not just allies, we were the two pillars holding up the new world we were trying to build, and we would stand, together, against whatever darkness came next.
The failed attack changed everything. The distant threat was now a wound on our border. Greywood Hold moved from vigilance to a state of guarded readiness. Kaelen spent less time in his study with me and more time on the walls, drilling warriors, perfecting defenses. The easy camaraderie of starlit talks was buried under the pressing weight of security. I threw myself into my work with a new ferocity. The healing den became a strategic center. Mira and I stockpiled supplies, prepared field kits for patrols, and I began discreet lessons for any shifter who showed interest in basic wound care. A warrior who can stanch his own bleeding lives to fight another day, I told a skeptical Torvin, who eventually sent a handful of his steadiest fighters to learn. The prisoners, 3 purifiers who had survived the skirmish, were kept in the cells. Kaelen interrogated them himself. He shared little, but the grim set of his mouth after each session told me enough. Their ideology was a virus. Humans were a disease. Shifters who tolerated them were traitors to their own nature, and the Greywood, with a human living in its heart, was their prime target for purification. One afternoon, a week after the attack, Kaelen summoned me to the cells. "I want you to see," he said, his voice flat. "I want you to understand what we face." The cell was clean but stark. The young shifter inside, perhaps not much older than me, had the fanatic's hollow eyes. He glared at Kaelen with pure hatred. Then his gaze landed on me. The hatred curdled into disgust. "You keep a pet," he spat. "You defile the alpha lineage. The stories are true." Kaelen didn't react, but I felt the anger ripple off him. "This is Elara Reed. She is under the protection of the Greywood. She is Pack." The prisoner laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Pack. She is a human, weak, short-lived, a blight. And you are weak for allowing her scent to foul your den. The true alphas of the North will come. They will burn this place and start anew." His words were meant to wound, but they only solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about land or power. It was about an idea so toxic it poisoned the mind. I stepped forward, ignoring Kaelen's warning hand. "You speak of purity," I said, my voice calm, echoing strangely in the stone room. "But what is pure about hatred? What is strong about fearing someone simply because their heart beats differently? I have seen the strength of the Pack. It is in their loyalty, their courage, their love for each other. That is true strength. What you preach, that is the weakness, the fear of a small, dark mind." He stared at me, stunned into silence. He had expected fear, subservience, not a calm rebuttal. The human was not cowering. She was pitying him. I turned to Kaelen. "I've seen enough." Outside, in the sunlight, I took a deep, cleansing breath. "They are sick, Kaelen, not in body, but in spirit." "A sickness that seeks to spread," he said, watching me closely. "You were unafraid." "I was angry," I admitted, "and sad. To choose such a small, hateful life? Your mother would have said the same. He fell into step beside me as we walked toward the gardens. Seeing you face that venom, it gives me hope. If your calm truth can silence their rage, even for a moment, then there is a weapon here they cannot fight. It's not a weapon, it's just what's right. That, he said, stopping and turning to me, is the most powerful weapon of all. The tension of the past week seemed to coil between us, mixed with the new understanding from the cells. The danger was real, but so was our defiance. We were not just defending stones and trees, we were defending an idea, a world where a river could bring together a human woman and a shifter prince, where an alpha could find counsel in a healer's words. An envoy from the Silver Pine Pack arrives tomorrow, Kaelen said, changing the subject, though his intensity remained. They are our strongest allies. Their alpha, Varen, is traditional. He may not understand your presence here. I felt a flicker of apprehension. Should I make myself scarce? No, Kaelen said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. You will stand at my left hand, beside Torvin. You are Greywood. You will be seen. His declaration was a public claiming more significant than any private word. To stand at the Alpha's left at a formal gathering was a position of high honor, typically reserved for the Beta or a valued elder. It would send a message to the ally, to the pack, to anyone watching. Elara Reed was not a secret, not a pet. She was part of the Greywood's strength. The following evening, the great hall was prepared for ceremony. I wore a dress of deep forest green, my mother's pendant shining at my throat. My heart thundered as I took my place on the dais, feeling the weight of every pack member's gaze and the piercing, appraising stare of the visiting alpha, Varen, a stern man with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like chips of flint. The feast proceeded, the talk of alliances and patrols flowing. Varen's eyes kept drifting to me, his expression unreadable. Finally, as the meal ended, he addressed Kaelen directly, his voice carrying. Your hold is as strong as ever, Kaelen. Your warriors are disciplined, but I see a new feature. He nodded toward me. A human at the high table, an unusual choice. A hushed silence fell. This was the challenge. Kaelen didn't even glance at me. He looked directly at Varen, his posture relaxed but his aura radiating absolute authority. Elara Reed is not a feature, Varen. She is a member of my pack. She saved my son's life. She uncovered a blood mage's plot against us and our human neighbors. Her courage and wisdom have strengthened the Greywood. Her place is earned. Varen's eyebrows rose. He looked at me again, his gaze less dismissive, more curious. A healer, I am told, I said. I am, Alpha Varen. I use the knowledge my mother, Marin Reed, learned during her time as healer to this pack, and what I know from my own people. Recognition dawned in his flinty eyes. Marin's daughter, he said. I knew Marin, a woman of great honor. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod to Kaelen. The bloodline is strong, then. My apologies. Old eyes sometimes see shadows where there is light. The tension broke. The message had been sent and received, not with hostility, but with the firm, unshakable confidence of the Alpha. I had been presented, not as a weakness, but as an asset, as family. Later, as the hall emptied, Kaelen leaned close, his words for me alone. You see, the world adjusts, one truth at a time. I looked at him, at this king who had just staked his credibility on a human woman, and felt a surge of loyalty so fierce it stole my breath. He was building a future, and he was building it with me at his side. The path ahead was still shadowed by the purifiers, but in that moment, standing in the hall as acknowledged pack, I knew no darkness could extinguish the light we were kindling together.
Spring came to the Greywood.
not with a gentle sigh, but with a defiant, vibrant shout. Life burst from the thawing earth, and with it, a new spirit seemed to rise in the hold. The purifier threat, while not gone, had been pushed back to a dull rumble. Our alliances were strengthened, our borders secure. The attack had not broken us, it had forged us into something harder, brighter. My place was now as natural as the stones underfoot. I no longer walked the halls as the human, but as Elara. Lyon's lessons with me were now formalized, part shifter lore, part human history, a blend that made him beam with pride. He was growing, not just in size, but in a unique understanding of both worlds he bridged. One bright morning, Kaelen found me in the herb garden, repotting seedlings. He stood watching for a moment, a softness in his eyes I'd come to cherish. "Walk with me," he said. "There is something I wish to show you." He led me away from the hold, down a path I didn't know, to a secluded clearing where the silver thread river widened into a tranquil pool. Sunlight dappled through the new leaves, dancing on the water. In the center of the clearing stood a young, silver-barked tree, its branches just beginning to bud. "This is a moon willow," Kaelen said, his voice reverent. "They are rare. They only grow where great magic or great love has touched the earth." He turned to me. "I had it brought here and planted after you agreed to stay." I looked from the beautiful, fragile tree to his face, my throat tight. "Why?" "Because you are both," he said, stepping closer. "A touch of a different kind of magic, and a love for this pack, for my son, that has changed the very soil of this place." He took my hands in his touch warm and sure. "Elara, I have spoken of duty, of debt, of strategy, but I have not spoken the truth of my heart." My breath caught. The world narrowed to the clearing, to the river's song, to his golden eyes holding me captive. "The moment you stepped out of the river, drenched and defiant, with my son in your arms, something in my world, frozen since Lyra's tassing, began to thaw. You challenged me, you counseled me, you brought light and laughter back to these halls. You healed more than wounds, you healed a heart I thought was forever scarred." Tears blurred my vision. "Kaelen, I do not claim you as a mate in the old binding way," he said, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "That is a choice for your free human heart to make in its own time, if it ever wishes to. But I claim you before the sun and the moon, before the river and the trees, as my partner, my equal in spirit, the other half of the rule of this territory. Will you stand beside me, Elara? Not as a healer in the hold, but as its lady, as my companion in all things." It was not a demand, it was the most profound offering. He was giving me a title, a role, but more than that, he was giving me a shared sovereignty, a life woven together not by fate or magic, but by choice, by respect, by a love that had grown as quietly and strongly as roots in the dark earth. I looked at our joined hands, at the moon willow symbolizing a new growth, at the man who had seen my worth when even I hadn't. I thought of my mother who had left this world to follow her human heart, and whose path had somehow led me back to its wild, wonderful core. "Yes," I said, the word a release and a beginning. 1,000 times yes. I will stand with you, Kaelen, as your partner, as Lyon's guardian, as a daughter of the Greywood. A smile broke across his face, transforming the stern alpha into a man radiant with joy. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he lifted my hand and pressed his forehead against it, a gesture of deep reverence and union. It was more intimate than any kiss, a merging of purpose and promise. We stood like that for a long time by the river that had started it all, the future stretching before us like the unfurling leaves of the moon willow. That evening, in the great hall, Kaelen made the announcement. He called me to stand with him on the dais, his hand in mine. "Pack of the Greywood," his voice rang out, strong and clear. "You know Elara Reed, the river's gift, the healer, the courageous heart who helped save our prince and our peace. Today, I ask her, and she has agreed, to take her place not just among us, but beside me, as Lady of the Greywood, my partner in leading this pack into a new age. The reaction was not shock, but a deep, resounding approval. A howl of celebration rose, not from one throat, but from hundreds. A beautiful, wild symphony of acceptance. Lion whooped and dashed forward, hugging us both. As the celebration swirled around us, music, laughter, the pack welcoming its new lady with genuine warmth, Kaelen leaned close. "Our story began with a river," he murmured. "Where do you think it will flow now?" I looked out at the sea of happy faces, at the blend of human and shifter in the unity of the pack, at the young prince who was our shared hope. I squeezed his hand, my mother's pendant warm and light against my heart. "It will flow," I said with absolute certainty, "toward a future we build together, a future of strength and sweetness and peace." And in the heart of the ancient woods, under a canopy of stars that had witnessed centuries of solitude, a new legend was born, not of a human who saved a pup, but of a partnership that saved a kingdom. The river's gift and the Alpha King, two halves of one whole, finally home.